Early on the 10th of July, the London Welsh arrived at Queen's Nullah. Nullah is an old Indian army term for valley or ravine. This was their jumping-off point for the attack.
They're hugging this bank because they know the closer to it they get, the safer they are. Jones says he can hear singing by the genuine Welsh, he calls them, because he's in the London Welsh. They're singing Welsh songs, which gives him some courage as well. And whilst they're hugging that bank, they look up and they can see puffs of chalk dust along the top of it. That's from German machine guns 2 kilometres away, waiting for them to go over the top.
No photographs or film exists of the attack on the 10th of July, but we do have Jones's epic poem In Parenthesis, a fusion of modernist poetry and Welsh mythology, which culminates in the attack on Mamay Wood. Jones and his compatriots scrambled the chalky face of Queen's Nullah to advance 500 yards across a plateau filled with wheat and wildflowers.
This is Jones's view as he's going into the attack. There's Mamay Wood in the distance. This is the plateau. And what Jones does here, he tells us something which no historian ever does. He dismantles a moment. There's a shell burst, the sun's low in the sky, it's early in the morning. It goes dark with the dust and the smoke. And then he describes particles of chalk dust sparkling in the air. He's walking through this into the attack.
You drop apprehensively, the sun gone out. Strange airs smite your body, and muck rains straight from heaven. And everlasting doors lift up for O2 Weevil. You can't see anything but sheen on drifting particles. And you move forward in your private bright cloud like one assumed, who was borne up by an exterior volition.
He's got an eye for detail, for the tiny telling details that a filmmaker or an artist would have. His work feels like it's been broken by those events at the start of the 20th century. This is the kind of poetry that Eliot might have written had he been in the wood here, Ezra Pound. It's a fragmented, more, I suppose, contemporary sounding poetic voice. And that's shocking.
After descending from the plateau, Jones and his surviving comrades were confronted with Mamay Wood itself. A mile deep, this old hunting ground was now a dense, overgrown forest, filled with experienced German troops. The line of attack was through the wood's southern edge, following a German defensive line known to the British as Strip Trench, all the while avoiding machine gun fire from the wood's flanks. By the time they entered the trees, a third of Jones's unit had fallen.
This is a strange place, partly because it's off the beaten track and quite difficult to get into, partly because there are still the remnants of trenches and shell holes here, but mainly I think because David Jones described it so vividly, and so much of it still feels intact the way he describes the undergrowth. I feel odd in this wood. There's a beauty to it, and you feel guilty about responding to the beauty of it because under our feet are still countless bodies.
As the Royal Welsh slowly progressed up Strip Trench, they discovered that fighting in woodland brought its own deadly challenges.
The trees are falling. There's shelling coming down upon them. Worse than that, the shells are actually hitting the tree trunks, and a little bit like in an ancient galleon, say Nelson's time, it is blowing those tree trunks apart. So you have trees falling, splinters flying about, shrapnel, bullets. Machine gun fire is coming in from both sides of the wood because the Germans know at which point in the wood the British are advancing. So they're walking through streams of bullets.
And the storm rises higher, and all who do their business in the valley do it quickly. and up in the nightshades where death is closer packed in the tangled avenues, fair Balder falleth everywhere, and thunder besom breakings bright the wood, and a golden bough for Johnny and Jack, and blasted oaks for Jerry, and shrapnel the swift Jupiter for each expectant tree. After what hypostases uniting, withered limbs for the chosen, for the forechosen. Take care the black brush fall in the night rides, where they deploy for the final objective.
He describes at one point the severed head of a fellow soldier with a kind of Cheshire cat rictus grin on it. He describes other soldiers half naked with their clothes torn apart by the bramble and the wire as they're stuck and exposed to enemy fire, trying to just get through the woods to the next stage. That sense of chaos and camaraderie, but ultimately horror and unpredictability, I imagine must imprint itself on your memory so vividly you never lose it.
Jones was fighting for around 20 hours. He helped push the Germans to the wood's northern edge, but he and his comrades were beaten back. Eventually, Jones felt something slam into his left leg. He'd been shot.
It's not some huge, sudden, climactic moment. It's a slow realization of what's happened. His left boot fills up. He describes the fluid percolating his boot, and suddenly he finds out his foot's wet, and it's with his own blood. Then he has to pick up his gun, and everything takes on a weight and a difficulty because he's struggling to walk, and what's just happened to him is sinking in. So this gun, which has become part of his identity as a soldier, the gun he could pick out of a row of guns as his, has its own idiosyncrasies, becomes a burden for him as he drags it through the wood, doesn't know what to do with himself.
The injured protagonist of In Parenthesis, like Jones himself, crawls away and awaits stretcher bearers. Then, the action cuts back to the spirit queen of the woods, presenting flowers to the fallen.
Emil has a curious crown. It's made of golden saxifrage. Fatty wears sweet briar. He will reign with her for 1,000 years. For Balder she reaches high to fetch his. Ulrich smiles for his myrtle wand. That swine Lilywhite has daisies to his chain. You'd hardly credit it. She plats talks of equal splendour for Mr. Jenkins and Billy Crower. Hansel with Gronwy share dog violets for a palm, where they lie in serious embrace beneath the twisted tripod. Sean gets St. John's wort. That's fair enough. Di Greatcoat. She can't find him anywhere. She calls both high and low. She had a very special one for him.
It's multi-layered, and I think he felt that the uniqueness and the horror of the experience warranted that. You don't write on one level, you don't just report what you've seen. He called on every kind of resource, mythic and vernacular, to try to come to terms, literally, with what he'd seen and experienced here.
In Parenthesis was published over 20 years after Jones's ordeal. Included in the dedication were the German infantry, some of who were still lying in Mamay Wood. The enemy front fighters who shared our pains, against whom we found ourselves by misadventure, wrote Jones.